Good morning, everyone. Let's wake up to Expert Insights with Soul Before Sunrise, my podcast dedicated to residential real estate. This series is going to bring you candid conversations, advice, and insider tips. Whether you're a real estate enthusiast or a professional in the field, start your day informed and inspired. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Betsy Cameron, and I serve as the president at the Ebby Halliday companies. Real estate has always been a part of my life. My mother has been a realtor for over 40 years, so I practically grew up in the industry. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to work in sales, management, and operations, which has given me a well-rounded perspective on the business. I'm especially excited about the future of real estate, from evolving technology to new ways we can support agents and clients. We also have some exciting projects and events coming up, including our EHC Summit that will take place in September. It's such a dynamic time in our industry, and I can't wait to dive into today's conversation. Well, I'm excited to welcome our very first guest of our Sold Before Sunrise podcast. So welcome Daniel Oney with the Texas Real Estate Research Center at Texas A&M University. Welcome.
Oh, well, thanks, Betsy. It's an honor to be here, especially to kick off this new podcast. So I'm super excited.
Well, I couldn't think of a better topic than to talk about forecasts for our residential space.
Sure. I love to talk about real estate, so I'm ready to get going.
Good. Well, before we get started, I want to ask you a very important question.
Okay.
How did you end your evening last night, and how did you start your morning this morning?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It's important, right? Those bookends to our day, right? So, last night it was, I guess it was kind of off the hook. So my wife and I we're almost empty nesters now. Our oldest is a freshman in college, and so last night what did we do? So we made chicken Caesar salads. We watched an episode of Ted Lasso. We worked on a puzzle. Read a little bit, went to bed. So it was all over the place.
Wow. Lots going on. Lots of fun things going on. Right. Well, so how'd you start your morning this morning?
Yeah, I'm pretty disciplined in the morning, so the routine's pretty tight there. So first thing I had to get up in the morning, walk the dog, come back, have some coffee, do my quiet time, outline my day, to what am I going to be doing? So this morning I was noting, okay, I have this, I'm going to be doing a podcast today, I'm going to be doing a media interview, I have to work on some slides, just get all that lined up so that I can be more effective.
Right. So you don't first thing dive into your email in the morning?
No, I do not. I usually wait until about 9:30 before I hit the email. So I do a quick check for emergencies, but then I won't usually respond unless there's something pressing till later.
I love that. Quick check for emergencies and then move on. Okay. Well, I wanted to go ahead and get started. Let's talk about some market and economic trends.
Sure.
So how does Texas compare to other states as far as economic resilience and growth?
Right. So those are two questions, right? Resilience and growth. I always like to tell audiences we're so fortunate in Texas. Texas has a really diverse economy. So when I think about resilience, that's the ability for an economy to bounce back when something bad happens, right? And so Texas, we have a lot of big cities. Those big cities have different economies. They focus on different industries. So if one part of the state's down, usually, other parts of the state are doing well. So we tend to be even our bad times are kind of, even keel, right? So the growth, that's is the economy getting bigger, right? And so Texas economy has actually slowed down a little bit recently. So if you look back over the last 5 years, we were one of the top 5 growth economies in the country compared to other states. Recently, we've fallen down. The last year, we're ranked 18th. And it's really more a matter of Texas hasn't slowed so much, but there's some other states that have started growing faster that have become more competitive.
What are those other states? Who are the top runners?
Right. So we're used to Texas being competitive to places like California or New York, but there's a lot of states in the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana, and especially in the Southeast, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Georgia, we know, of course, Florida, that have really stepped up their game in terms of economic development. They're growing a lot. They're becoming more competitive for talent and for investment.
Yeah, I know Nashville and, like you said, parts of the Carolinas.
Right, Raleigh, Durham area, Charlotte, Atlanta. But then South Carolina has really been booming as well with, automobile manufacturing. The port there is so important for that region. So there's a lot more competitive states now than there were, say, 5-6 years ago.
And speaking of industries, what types of industries are promoting job growth within our marketplace in our state?
So I know we're sitting here in Dallas, but maybe I'll talk about the state overall. So I mean, Texas job growth has been steady. So we talked about the GDP, the value of the economy. That growth has slowed a little bit, but it's still growing. The job growth has been pretty even. So the state has been growing at about 2%. The nation has been doing about the same. So Texas has been matching the nation. And the different markets in Texas, or some are above and some are below that average. So San Antonio is actually the fastest growing of the four big markets in terms of jobs. DFW is actually the slowest, but it's not that much slower than the state average. And then Houston and Austin are right about at the state average. So when it comes to industries that are growing, I mean, we're seeing the main growth industry in every part of Texas is government. Some people are kind of surprised at that, but it's mostly local government jobs. Texas is adding households, population so fast. Most of our cities are growing. And so you're seeing a lot of job growth in basic government services, things like teachers and firefighters and police. It's not so much growth in state government or in federal government. After that, healthcare is doing really well, but that's kind of universal. When you get down to what makes a city unique, what we're seeing is that Houston, surprisingly, has seen some real strong growth in professional services. Austin and Dallas are finance, and that's not surprising with Dallas. It's a little bit new for Austin. San Antonio is still kind of being driven by hospitality. But for North Texas, it's the usual ones. It's finance, professional services, some logistics, though that slowed a little bit recently.
Okay. Well, what is your outlook on the housing inventory? Will buyers see any relief anytime soon?
Yeah, I don't have great news about that, right? So we do forecast housing and other assets at the center. And so what we've seen since the peak in COVID, that's what really drove, some big price increases. The supply hasn't kept up. And so there's just been too many buyers and a little bit too much money chasing that fixed inventory. So the units that are available for sale, so look at existing units and new units, that has been creeping up a little bit. So I think people are feeling more optimistic. There's been a little bit of softening in interest rates, though they're still higher than they used to be.
Right.
So I think more people feel optimistic about selling. We talked before here that we're seeing more listings here in North Texas, that, so that it seems to be healthy. We haven't seen as much new construction as we would like. You really need to increase the supply. Fortunately, last year, Texas did see more new building permits than we have in a few years. So that's a good sign, right? Those will begin hitting the inventory in another year, 18 months. Right. And new starts, those are up as well. So we think 2025 is going to be an improvement on supply and inventory, but I don't know that we're going to see much relief on the price side.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So the sellers, have they gotten used to the new price points, or I guess not new price point, but what it should be priced at? Are we seeing any relief in that area?
Not a lot. So, I mean, it varies from market to market.
Sure.
So some markets, I go back to Austin, they've seen some big pullbacks in prices in recent years. But statewide, and in North Texas, it kind of matches the state. We see, most of the price increases happened over about 18 months, starting in 2020. So by 2022, that was pretty much over with, and prices have kind of moved sideways. Yeah. So we're actually projecting prices to go up a little bit, a few percentage points this year. And again, that'll vary from market to market, but again, I think it's a seller's market still, and as long as they're prudent, they're probably going to get pretty close to what they ask.
Yeah. Okay. What are the biggest risks to economic growth that you see here in Texas?
Yeah, so when I think about the risks, I like to think about maybe some long-term risks. So we talked about growth. Demographics is really important, and a lot of Texas's growth in recent years has come from international migration. If you go back 5 years ago, the majority of our growth was coming from people moving to Texas from other states. This last year, it was mostly, in fact, almost 60% of it was people moving to Texas from another country. And so if we see, there's some new policies in Washington, if we see stricter immigration controls, maybe the U.S. being less friendly to immigration, that could put a cramp on our total population growth and job growth and all of that. So that's something that could slow the economy a little bit. Texas, we talked about Texas has some more competitors now. And so if you go back a generation, our housing was cheaper than places in the Southeast or the Midwest. It's not anymore. We're as expensive or more expensive than in places like Atlanta or Chicago or Charlotte, what have you. So, and we got more congestion. There's just more traffic, there's more people. So that makes Texas a little bit less attractive to someone who could choose to go to a Tennessee or a North Carolina or a Florida or Texas. We don't shine as much as we used to compared to those other states. So those are long-term things that could slow our growth down. Shorter term, there could always be some world event that would trigger a major recession. I mean, our forecast doesn't really see anything. We think the economy is going to grow slightly this year, but something unforeseen could happen, right?
Right. So if you could describe the Texas economy in 3 words, what would it be?
Okay, so it's big, it's diverse, and I'd say opportunistic. Because I think Texans, our businesses, our communities are super aggressive. They're generally pro-growth. They're generally open to new ideas. So we're the second biggest state, second biggest economy. Like I mentioned, we're super diverse, probably more diverse than any other state, except maybe California. And then I think we have a culture that's really open to doing new things.
Well, and speaking of California, I know that we've seen a lot of influx from California coming into Texas. Right. That's as well as some other areas, but I think a lot from California. So and then of course with the fires that just happened, I know that there's possibly some additional movement, but that'll be interesting to watch to see.
You're right. Actually, if you look at migration, California is the number 1 contributor to Texas. There's an interesting nuance. People from Northern California seem to prefer Central Texas. People from Southern California tend to like Dallas-Fort Worth a little bit better. So there's some difference in the migration pattern. So I don't know. People ask about. I've had that question about the fires from quite a few people. It's hard to tell what that impact would be. I know the fires were devastating, but just kind of back of the envelope numbers, the number of units that were destroyed, Los Angeles builds more houses than that every year, so of course it's horrible, the loss of life, the loss of property. Right. Their housing was already so tight, they can't afford to lose anything. But that's a relatively small number compared to the size of even LA. Sure. So I don't know that we would notice that in the migration numbers. I don't know if you'd notice it statistically.
Right. Okay, let's move into the topic of policy, trade, and business impact.
Okay.
I've heard a lot from people just talking. How could the tariffs, whether new or existing, impact our local market? Do you have a thought on that?
There's probably more brain cells being worn out thinking about the tariffs than any other topic right now, right? We get asked about that from media interviews and from our stakeholders just all across the state. I mean, the problem with tariffs is that they're really complicated. So I don't want to go into the details, but a couple of things to think about. So you can think about a tariff as like any other kind of price increase. Some companies can pass that on to the consumer and some can't. So if you think about there's substitutes for those products, or if there's a lot of competition for those products, then a company in a country that's facing a higher tariff may not be able to sell the product if they raise the price. So, and then the other thing is the timing of it, short term versus long term. I mean, certainly any kind of short term change disrupts the economy. It's inefficiencies. It can raise prices on people. The question is, are we going to see short-term tariffs used as policy levers? Is that what the administration wants to do? Is to get countries to do things for them, or are these long-term changes? And if it's a really long-term change, then actually those can often work out in the end. Because if the goal is to sort of stimulate more reinvestment in the U.S., and that's something that we're seeing anyway since COVID, a lot of companies realized they didn't want their supply chain to be completely at risk. So they moved more production to North America or the U.S. And if these tariffs have a similar effect, you could see tariffed goods being produced in North America, and the long-term prices actually go down. But that's why there's those questions. It's like, can the seller get away from it and pass on the cost? And that differs by product. And then is it going to be short term or long term? But that's the theory, right? Okay. The practical impact is that, building houses in Texas, we do import lumber from other places. We import windows. We import, electrical systems, HVAC, a lot of things that go into a Texas home are built somewhere else. So it could certainly make a, affordability problem worse, at least in the short term.
Yeah. All very interesting.
Yeah. It's a tough issue.
Yes. Well, what should real estate professionals be paying attention to over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, that's a good window, right? I mean, we're all so busy. People have their heads down, they're hustling, trying to do deals and all that. So if you can only focus on a few things, what should you pay attention to? And I would go back to one of the things we've already talked about. It's the demographics. That's the floor under all of our real estate markets, whether it's commercial or residential or land. And if our demographics stay strong, if we keep seeing population growth, that's a great sign. If we start to see slow down in that growth, then maybe we are going to see some slower times ahead. Now that could mean less demand for housing. That could soften home prices. You might sell more homes in that environment. But that's one thing to pay attention to, right? I think the other thing is just changing in the composition of our population. So there's a statistic I like to tell audiences. If Texas demographics look today like they did in the year 2000, so 25 years ago, we would have 1 million more children in Texas. And we'd have 1 million fewer people in retirement age. So just like everywhere else, we're getting older. People are tending to have fewer children. And so, again, longer term, that's a smaller pipeline. People going into the workforce, people starting families, people buying homes. So that's a reason that, again, we could see some slowing, not immediately, but just pay attention to those, because it also means demand for different types of products. A lot of housing is typical. It's targeted at the couple of parents with kids, and they're now a minority. There are other types of households that are the majority. Single people especially. So, are we going to see new product that tailors to those different segments of the market? So, I think look at what builders are doing. Are builders moving toward that, or are they staying conservative? Or are they going to keep focusing on that traditional family?
I heard something at a conference a couple of weeks ago that was talking about the baby boomers are the population to really look to. And also with that, more and more kids are moving in with their parents first to kind of save a little, nest egg prior to home ownership. So the average age of a first-time home buyer has increased.
That's right.
As opposed to before. So they were really talking about focusing on that baby boomer generation that will have a lot of movement as far as sales are concerned. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that could be right. The baby boomers they've affected every institution, right, as they've sort of moved through their lives. I'm curious. So many people have. Your audience is probably familiar with like rate lock. And how many people have mortgages right now that are well below. Mortgages right now are about 6.7%. I think about 90% of the people that have a mortgage right now have a lower interest rate than that. And one statistic I saw is that half of people with a mortgage, their current rate's lower than 4%. So that is a barrier to selling. But you're right; these people are not going to need these homes forever.
Right.
And so what are they going to do with them? So that could open up a lot of new housing for younger people to move into. And yeah, people are putting off buying because if you look at there's used to be this old rule of thumb: if your house was 3 times your income, it was considered affordable. So if you made $50,000 a year, $150,000 house was affordable. In all of our Texas markets now, that number's closer to 6. That means the home costs almost 6 times what the income is. Wow. So it's just really harder for a young family to move into the housing market than it used to be.
I think about that for my kids, and I think, how in the world are they going to afford to purchase a home? Are there any unexpected trends that or stats that have surprised you recently?
I think, I don't know things that have surprised me, but there's things I would say one of the things is that consumer spending has been pretty strong. I think most economists thought there was going to be a recession last year. And there was just so much income put into consumer pockets from COVID stimulus and lower interest rates that there was just a lot of gas in the tank. The economy kept going longer than most people thought. So we didn't have a recession, or if we did, we had like a mild slowdown that started picking up. So the consumer resilience has kind of surprised me, especially as we've seen prices go up. And for a lot of families, I mean, people joke about the price of eggs, but I mean, groceries did everything got more expensive over the last couple of years. So, on average, you could see consumer prices went up 30, 40%. That's what the statistics show. In certain segments, probably worse. So that's been a surprise that people have been able to keep spending. I think from a Texas standpoint, I've been a little surprised at how fast our economy slowed this last year. I talked about it slowed compared to other states where we were doing twice the national average in terms of job growth or GDP growth, and now we're about the national average. So still healthy, but just we're not blowing everybody away.
Right, as we had in the past.
Yeah.
What's the most misunderstood aspect of the Texas economy?
Most misunderstood aspect of the Texas economy. It's funny. People you talk about, the home folks don't often understand things, and then people that are not from here don't understand things. So there's different myths for different people. I think one of them is that I was in Central Texas recently, and they've seen how Austin and San Antonio are growing. And when I put numbers up that showed Dallas-Fort Worth is still adding by far the most people, the most jobs, compared to almost as much as the rest of the state.
What did I read? I read something, how many people are coming into the DFW marketplace, like a day, 400 a day or something?
Well, yeah, that's probably right. If you look at a number of about 1,300 or 1,400 in the state overall. So, we're about, North Texas is about a third of that growth.
Okay.
And so this region is just so big. And I think people that are not from here don't realize how big Dallas-Fort Worth is, that it's just the number of corporations that are headquartered here, how diverse the economy is. So that's a myth that I think everybody thinks about Austin if they're not in Texas. And Austin has been booming, absolutely.
Right.
But it's still relatively small compared to a Houston or Dallas-Fort Worth.
And I think you mentioned earlier, but as far as Austin is concerned, they have seen a little bit of a drawback on prices and movement. So,
right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We would say that, you look at the numbers, typically a metro area in Texas will build we're talking about apartments now, but just we'll build a new apartment for every new household that shows up in the market. Well, I mean, Dallas-Fort Worth got a little bit over its skis. We were building two, new apartments since COVID. Austin's been they built 4 new apartments for every new household. Wow. So they've got a lot of inventory. They're going to grow into it eventually. Sure. But that's probably putting some, that's competition, especially for rental housing. And it's probably some competition for some of the lower end for sale products, because you can move into a brand new shiny apartment for a while, versus buying an older home. Right. So that probably makes that market a little softer even than it would have been.
Right. Well, I have a couple fun questions that I wanted to ask you.
All right, sure.
If you weren't an economist,
right,
what would you be?
Right. If I weren't an economist, I don't know. I think I think I wanted to be a farmer as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love being out doing that. I love gardening right now, so I do that whenever I can. Not as much as I used to, but get a little piece of Texas and sit there and do your farm, and then I don't know, gentleman farmer and read and write and do that angle too. So
okay, I like it. I like to garden too, and we're coming up on the
it's time, right?
Nice weather.
You're late already. You don't start going to have some stuff in right now. So.
Right. What is the best and worst financial advice you have gotten?
I really don't know, because I typically don't listen to other people's financial advice.
You don't? Okay.
So I haven't tried out too many suggestions that other people have given me. So I can't tell you what's been best and worst. I've given myself some bad advice, but
there you go.
Yeah, it's my decision, so I tend to want to do it for myself.
Uh-huh. If you could sit down at the table and dine with any economist, is there one in particular or a couple in particular that you would love to sit around the table and chat?
Yeah, actually, thanks for giving me the option of two, because I was thinking about actually one of my professors in college, one of the teachers that really turned me on to economics. So he passed away about 5 years ago. So I would love to be able to sit down and talk to him about what I'm doing and what does he think about these issues today, and then maybe someone like, people tend to know who Adam Smith was, right? So he wasn't the first economist, but he was one of the first guys that started looking at the economy in the beginning of the modern world. So he published his work back when America was declaring its independence from Britain, 1776, right? So he was watching those events when they were happening, and he had this reputation of being kind of an absent-minded professor, but he got out and toured factories and toured businesses and talked to business people and talked to politicians. So he didn't just sit like a lot of economists would today, just kind of sit behind a computer and look at numbers. He was out in the field. Yep. And I think we need more of that. So, but those would be a couple of people. I think they'd be an interesting dinner party for me.
Okay, good. If Texas's economy were a Texas barbecue dish, what would it be and why?
Oh yeah, so I go back to the three things that describe it. So I think Texas would be it's like the perfect mix of moist and dry brisket, with some onions and then maybe some fried okra.
Ooh,
so you've got a little bit of everything there, but it's got a lot of mass to it, a lot of density to it too. So you're really satisfied after you eat it.
I love that. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Any other parting words you would love to share?
Wow, we've really covered pretty much everything. I mean, I guess the only thing I would just share with your audience or to pass on to them is just, take advantage of the resources that we have at the Texas Real Estate Research Center. If you're a license holder in Texas, you probably TG Magazine, right? You get that in the mail, but that's only one of the outlets we have. There's a lot of data, other reports, things that just get published on our website. Be sure and take advantage of that. And email us, call us, let us know if there's things that you would like us to be looking at or things that are important in your practice, because that feedback is super beneficial as we put together our work plan for the year. So just take advantage of us, rely on us, and tell us what you think we should be looking at.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us again, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
No, I'm glad for the opportunity. Thanks for having me.